So that's a brief overview of the background of the program. We're going to get into now how to build and verify indoor airPLUS homes, and the first primary section is moisture management. I'm going to spend a little time here, Brett, talking about these next slides.
Yeah, so as we're going through these slides, you will see this logo emerge here, which is pretty similar, but you'll notice a difference in the P or the C. And so all you really need to know is when you see this logo emerge on the bottom right or the top, if it's got the P, that means it's actually corresponding with an actual LEED v4 prerequisite. And if you see the C, then you'll see by following this path in Indoor airPLUS, you will obtain LEED credit. And we'll go over all the LEED credits at the end, and that was also in one of the handouts you have as well.
Great, thanks. Well, let's dive into moisture control. Sometimes moisture is overlooked in new buildings because we feel like we have it really ironed out now as far as the building envelope, but it's a really important concern, and you know, we have roughly 19% of U.S. households have at least one person with asthma. Many people know friends and family members who have some type of respiratory illness or issue, and we certainly want to make our new homes better for them. We know that mold grows where there's moisture, and moisture can be, you know, catastrophic from the outside in as far as bulk moisture. You see some examples of that here, but it also might be humidity issues, and as we see more higher performing buildings and tighter building envelopes, we want to address those things as well. So we look at item 1.1, which is site and foundation drainage, and Energy Star has some requirements in their water management system builder checklist already surrounding these. For Indoor airPLUS, we also require the installation of a drain or a sump in basement and crawl space floors. There are some exceptions to this if you're in a dry climate or if you have a site that has free draining soil, but this is also a LEED prerequisite. Then capillary break installation is the next item, item 1.2. So under the polyethylene sheeting, or if you use some type of extruded polystyrene insulation under the slab, that's a capillary break in itself, but we also require the installation of a 4-inch layer of aggregate. Alternatively, you can use sand and a geotextile matting as well. Again, another LEED prerequisite. There are some exceptions to this with Indoor airPLUS, such as dry climates or if you're doing a slab on grade. And there's also an alternative path for gut rehabs, which we'll talk about next as well. Here's an image, kind of a cutaway of what typical capillary break installation looks like. Where I was used to building in the Mid-Atlantic and in the Northeast, this was very common to put 4 inches of aggregate under your slab. It's not always as common in some locations. If you are doing a gut rehab, there is an alternative slab treatment that's outlined in the Energy Star requirements, and we reference that as well. You can put polyethylene above the slab if you don't want to be tearing out the entire slab in the gut rehab. And if it's an occupiable space, you want to use a durable floor covering in that case. The difference for Indoor airPLUS is that if you're doing this in Radon Zone 1, you still have to address radon in the home. So in that case, you would have to install an active radon mitigation system with using a subslab depressurization, and then do a test out at the end as well. We may not know exactly what is underneath that slab, so we want to make sure that we're going as far as we can to eliminate the risks of radon in the home in these cases. So items 1.3 and 1.4 deal with foundation walls and basements and crawl spaces. And again, these follow some LEED prerequisites as well. Finishing all of the concrete walls or masonry walls in the exterior with some type of damp proofing, that has become very commonplace in the industry right now. But what is maybe not quite so common is doing a sealed and insulated and conditioned crawl space. And so that's the next 3 bullets that you see there. We want to seal the crawl space to prevent outside air infiltration and use at least R5 or whatever your local code requirement is for insulating crawl space and perimeter walls, and then providing condition there to that crawl space as well. That's a really great way to set up a much more durable and healthier home for the occupants by bringing that space into conditioned space. Again, a few exceptions for flood zones or dry climates. We do have a recent exception within the last year for this requirement that's related to dehumidification. And so we still want to have a sealed crawl space, but in lieu of the perimeter wall insulation and the conditioned air, we now allow for active dehumidification in a crawl space as well. So some builders are very used to putting bats or some type of insulation in the floor system, and just don't want to make a big shift to put insulation on the perimeter walls of the crawl space. This is an option for them to create, a healthier, drier environment in that crawl space as well. So the dehumidifier should be drained to the outside or just sump pump so that there's no issue of going down there to change buckets or anything like that. Items 1.5 through 1.7 in Indoor airPLUS deal with wall drainage. And again, Energy Star has adopted a lot of previous requirements for Indoor airPLUS into their water management checklist, which is great. Fully flashing windows and door openings, using an exterior, a drainage plane behind exterior wall cladding. If homes are not using gutters, there is an Energy Star exception to allow this in certain places. And if those homes don't use gutters, Indoor airPLUS requires that the foundation walls be brought 16 inches above grade, or that a more significant drip line is created away from the foundation with the roof at least 16 inches, or that there's an exterior cladding that can tolerate wetting and extend to 16 inches above grade. So there's a few options there, but really we want to avoid that splashback, the potential for damage and durability issues with heavy rains. And here's a nice cutaway of a typical wall drainage system, kind of showing those typical cladding details and flashing details at the bottom. The images on the left are courtesy of the DOE's Building America Solutions Center, and I think Joe Stebrick provided some of those as well. When I was doing construction and flashing windows and stuff, we always were told by my mentors, just think like a drip, right? We want to think about how the rain's going to shingle off of the building and ultimately get away. So the principle that you see in the top there of just down and out is pretty straightforward. And unfortunately, in the image in the bottom left, you can tell that isn't thinking that way. It's not thinking about down and out. Any water that hits that house wrap more than likely is going to get down behind that flashing and create some durability issues. Maybe this home wasn't quite complete yet. We don't know for sure, but that would be an example where you don't want to stop with this detail. Items 1.8 through 1.10 deal mostly with water managed roof. And again, building science fundamentals and moisture management details, such as kick-out flashing at the bottom of the roof to wall interface are important. Using bituminous membrane at valleys and roof decking penetrations. And then if you're in a cold climate, installing ice flashing over the sheathing at eaves. Again, there's some exceptions to these depending on your climate zone. Item 1.11 is moisture protective systems. And so we're moving from the outside of the building now to the inside of the building, actually, and we want to make sure that we're installing some type of moisture-resistant backing material behind tub and shower enclosures. And if you have an HVAC system that produces condensate, you want to make sure to include a corrosion-resistant drain pan. Then Indoor airPLUS also requires that if you have water supply pipes in exterior walls, that they be wrapped with pipe wrap. We certainly prefer that they not be in exterior walls to limit the risk of condensation and of potentially freezing, and also the fact that you're minimizing the insulation that can be in the exterior walls. But there are places and times where that needs to happen, so we require pipe wrap. There are some exceptions to that requirement that have recently been introduced. So if you're in a climate zone 1 to 3, the warmer climates, and you're in a dry climate, there's an exception for that. There's less risk of freezing, less risk of condensation in those areas. Or if you're using an insulation in the wall cavity that qualifies as an air barrier and you have the pipes on the inside half of the cavity, we're seeing some more high performance wall systems being introduced to the market these days. But again, there's some other lead prerequisites that match this requirement as well. As there are in items 1.12 and 1.13, we've combined a couple of these in this slide. One of the primary ones here is the issue with vapor retarders. You don't want to install a class 1 vapor retarder on the inside of a below grade exterior wall, or on any exterior walls if you're in a warm, humid climate. You can certainly increase the risk of condensation in that case. We don't want to install any building materials that have visible signs of water damage or mold, and certainly don't enclose framing members that have high moisture content. And by high moisture content, generally we're looking at 18%, 18% or greater. So one important and simple way to handle those issues is the images that you see on the right. You certainly want to cover and take good care of the building and framing materials as they're on the site. The last item in the moisture control section is item 1.14, moisture resistant materials. And this is very simple and straightforward too, but we want to put in only water resistant hard surface flooring materials in any areas where there's potential durability concerns like kitchens, bathrooms, and entries and laundries. This is an item that used to be wrapped in with item 1.11. If you've seen the Indoor Plus checklist previously, we've separated it out into a separate item just to make sure that exceptions were not confused. So this hasn't changed at all. It's just in a new location. And again, another prerequisite for LEED. Brett, do you want to take a few slides from here?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nick. So as some of you may have noticed or caught, a lot of the items that Nick was just talking about are housed neatly right within the water management system builder requirements. So before, this used to be required in Energy Star. Now it's just a sort of optional add-on. And so for LEED, though, it is, as you can see, a required prerequisite that the builder utilizes either this form or some variable of this form. They can actually create their own version of it for their own quality assurance, as long as it has all the requirements, and they have to sign off on it. And that's just the bare minimum requirements for the durability water management. So in the past in LEED, there used to be this big durability checklist, and there would be all these variables. Now it's kind of, the guessing game has been removed, and it's just you have to follow these very specific criteria within the LEED standard. So you can see that workbook that should have come along with you all in the handout. You can see here, let's make sure we're on the right slide. So here's the checklist, and so this is the EQ tab on that workbook, or not the EQ tab, I'm sorry, the MR tab, Materials and Resources. And so you can see here it is, Energy Star for Homes version 3 water management checklist is collected and signed by the builder. Again, there's nowhere to actually sign it, so just sign right on it or create their own and have it approved. And then, however, though, there is an extra point if you have your third-party rater actually verify each of these measures. And so the good news about Indoor airPLUS is that that HERS index rater actually needs to go through and verify each of these things. And so as long as that all looks good, there wouldn't be any reason you wouldn't be able to pick up this extra durability management verification point by pursuing the Indoor airPLUS program. And while we're on it, I just wanted to quick note that there have been some updates under the new version v4.1 for single-family homes. Now homes can just add a stainless steel hose instead of using a floor drain or a drain pan, which is statistically proven to reduce leaks more than a more expensive drain pan. So that's pretty cool. And then they've also added overhangs to keep water away from the house, and then plumbing condensation control. So basically just keeping all your plumbing in conditioned space, and so you can pick up some extra credit and make sure you're ensuring a durable and healthy home.